By the way, look at Caleb. What dog did y'all feed these two before you gave them to me? They're absolutely destroyed, mauled pair of headphones.
Wait, well, we can't even afford a new pair now with the current viewership.
Yeah, we did get reamed. Yeah, but bro, we had a 13-year-old. Like, come on, we're putting her on. She's 13.
You have to admit, bro, this podcast is now, bro.
Yeah, it is.
We don't hang out as much anymore. And now 2 years later, I fell off just like this podcast, dude. All right. And I'm pissed about it.
So for the longest time, the Impaulsive podcast was seen as Logan Paul's redemption arc and as proof that he was actually trying to become a better person. I mean, after all, it was a night and day difference from the content that he used to make in the past. And arguably, it was made for a more mature audience. However, lately it's very clear that he only sees the show and the platform as a way to advertise his own businesses and doesn't really care about it anymore, and for the past year has completely driven it to the ground. If you look at their most recent uploads, they've been really, really bad, and keep in mind that not too long ago, they were doing insane numbers on YouTube alone. That's not counting their even bigger clips channel, which is absolutely massive. I mean, at some point, they were getting nearly 100 million monthly views. Now, obviously, that's including shorts, but it's still massive. And just recently, they had their worst month ever and actually lost subscribers for the first time. But in this video, we won't be focusing on the mainstream allegations like the scam allegations and all of his mistakes because, let's be real, none of that really works. I mean, keep in mind that even after his whole Japan incident, when he uploaded that wild video, he returned and was bigger than ever. So instead, I wanted to focus more on how for the past year, Logan Paul completely lost it and has ruined his own reputation, a long-time friendship, and a massive business, which is the Impaulsive podcast. And what's interesting is that it all happened on camera. He essentially documented every step of the way, and it was clear that it all started with him showing how he treated his best friends and his own family.
Incredibly wrong. You think so? I said you need a therapist because you believe in Jesus?
What do I need a therapist for then?
Jesus isn't doing it for you. And I
what do I need a therapist for?
I don't believe you're as emotionally mature as you could be.
So when you think George needs a therapist, what category am I following?
Emotional intelligence.
Emotional, me.
Yes.
I'm not emotionally intelligent. Could you pick a time and frame any day of our life?
Here's one. 3 weeks ago when you were sitting in that chair, you stormed off this exact podcast because you're upset about something a comedian said.
No, I was upset that I finally discussed.
Listen, I just answered your question. I'm not looking for rationalization about the thing. I just answered your question.
Also, so you said in the past that you like it when people storm off. So I asked you, if I get upset and I want to storm off, is it cool? And you said, absolutely.
Georgie, you left, bro.
I'm going to jump in on that one. I'm not sure that that's representative of emotional intelligence.
Also, like these type of conversations should be behind closed doors.
I'll do something.
No, I'm gonna finish him off first. I gotta handle that business first.
We'll see, bro, because you definitely sniped the Nate Diaz fight from me, and I've been so lenient in giving you your opponents, and I think it's.
But it's not your option to give me my opponents. you haven't fought anyone. You don't fight. You don't fight real fights. It's just not your option to give me my opponents. You're not even a fighter. Like, you do exhibitions and lost like 4 years ago. So it's not your option to like give me my fights. That me and Nate Diaz have been talking about that for years, and then you popped up and were like, no, now it's my turn, I want that fight, and then start talking shit and then try to like get the fight in Saudi Arabia, like on the microphone, and like trying to like jump in on all of these things.
I think I'm better than you, and I think Nate chose you for a reason, and I think everyone knows that.
Now, some people will argue that Logan Paul's life has always been on camera and that him sharing personal details on his podcast is no different than what he used to do in the past. However, I think there's a difference between having some beef with your own brother or creators that are, the same size as you versus having a beef or a fight with your own friends, your own close friends who are way smaller than you are, and there's clearly a power dynamic going on. So that just makes it a little bit more serious now. Not only that, but naturally there's competition, huge egos, and millions of dollars involved in this whole situation, which makes it a lot more interesting. Because in terms of money and clout, the Impaulsive podcast is still a huge, massive platform and essentially a money printing machine. I mean, it's a great business to be part of, and the podcast has also fueled both George's and Mike's YouTube channel. Keep in mind that Mike's vlog or show, The Night Shift, started as a podcast on the Impaulsive studio and then slowly shifted into a vlog that also featured a lot of Logan Paul. However, as soon as he saw that one of his co-hosts wanted to start his own show that he wasn't going to have control over, he didn't like that. And it almost looked like he wanted to frame George as a bad co-host or as a bad person overall, which would explain why he was so satisfied or happy when Bobby Lee was completely destroying George Janko on that podcast until he eventually made him walk out. And then Logan Paul once again brought it up on another podcast and made it a point to call out George Janko for walking out, basically saying that he was emotionally immature and that religion probably wasn't working for him, which was a tough one and did not work well for Logan Paul.
Honestly, I think it just comes down to respect. I think once you stop respecting somebody, they could only dance by themselves with respect until they're like, okay, I could go dance on my own. I don't need it.
Was it the religion?
It's just their point of views, and it got messy, and it just started feeling like I wasn't around people that truly cared for my best interest, and I truly just had to respectfully walk away.
And I'm just doing this for a couple weeks so then I could leave and clickbait that why I left Impaulsive.
That's good. It's a good strategy.
That'll crush.
It's been done. It's been done many times, and it works.
By who? Oh,
well, you can make a real living for yourself. We've seen the model. We've seen the model work. I didn't know we were doing this right now.
I'm sorry.
I get it. I love this outlet. I love this outlet, and it exists because people watch. And without people watching, I just have a show like.
And although we don't know exactly why George Janko left the Impaulsive podcast, he himself has said that he essentially felt disrespected and that Logan Paul made him choose between his own show, doing his own thing, and being part of the Impaulsive show, which then forced him to, go ahead and go on his own. Now, the way that Logan Paul handled the whole George Janko situation was definitely weird. I mean, he was taking shots and making fun of his new show, which I think really shows how he truly felt about George the entire time. Basically, he was a close friend and a good friend when George was a yes man and was agreeing with everything he would say. But as soon as George started publicly disagreeing with him, then everything started going downhill. And now that Mike has also mentioned that he wants to start his own podcast, it makes me wonder if he's seen the ship going down in the future and just wants to have something else besides the vlog.
But the reason why I brought up the podcast thing and what you said is not to toot a horn or like drive that into stone again. It's because I don't have that agreement on the podcast front.
Okay.
Like I can start a show tomorrow. In fact, we're at a point where I think he knows and everybody knows that if I do that, it just drives ancillary traffic back to our show. Like a rising tide is, you know what I'm saying? Like it lifts
you look
all
at Nelk,
ships.
Steiny wants to start a podcast. They facilitate it within the Nelk empire.
Full send. He's going to promote Happy Dad. Like, yo, give me a bottle of Prime. Let me drive this shit because I'm out here and I'm saying that, by the way, maybe I wouldn't sound impulsive. Maybe it's not great for a Kevin Hart episode, but I can really talk my shit. The problem with me not reformatting into this saturated podcast world is I'm good at this shit, bro. Like I could really, like I can devour a 3-hour podcast. Give me 6 hours. I could do this all fucking day. Study my guests.
And once again, back then, the selling point of the podcast was that you were now seeing a better version of Logan Paul, mentored by an older person, guiding him through the way. And because of who he was, he had access to great guests, especially comedians, which made me watch the podcast here and there. But I think at this point, we can all agree that the whole thing was pretty fake. And it actually shows how good Logan Paul is or how smart he is when it comes to storytelling. Because now it's very clear that Mike was no mentor and had a little or no influence in Logan Paul's decision making. Because for the past year, every single mistake that Logan Paul made was a decision taken by him. Think about it. The way that he handled George leaving the podcast, the way that he responded to CoffeeZilla, him getting into an argument with Jake Paul, his own brother, and then being okay with putting the episode up on YouTube. That was all Logan Paul's decision. Nobody else.
On the spot, though, does Logan Paul still think he's a better boxer than Jake Paul?
No.
There we go.
Oh my God.
There we go.
I needed it. No. I actually gave up that thought like probably about a couple months before my last fight, but I was marketing, dog.
That's right. That's true. We were getting some clicks.
Now, even though Logan Paul has brought up some of his flaws on the podcast in an attempt to appear more self-conscious, it's clear that he's really not. And even his own brother has called it out and said that what he really needs is an ego death.
Back to that briefly. What's the next course of action for you and Logan? Do you sit down and have a
dinner and figure this out? Do you?
Well, he needs to go do ayahuasca like 3 times. That's no, like I'm being serious. Like
What?
that's the only answer. Like it is like
Y'all about to go out like the Island Boys.
no.
Damn.
Yeah.
Why do you say that?
Because he needs an ego death badly, and I think that's the only.
Do you feel like you had an ego death?
And I agree with that because one thing that has fueled all of this is the fact that for the past year, Logan Paul has seen massive success, insane success, even though he has made a couple of mistakes. So I could see how somebody like him actually believes that he can't do anything wrong. However, he has been humbled a little bit lately because for a while he used to actually believe that he was a better boxer than Jake Paul and that his podcast was the #1 show in the world. And lately, I mean, after not being able to knock out Dylan Dennis and then seeing that his own brother is actually boxing and knocking out legit boxers, I mean, that kind of seals it and proves that Jake is a better boxer. And then after seeing that his podcast, that his YouTube channel is losing subscribers, while at the same time his ex-co-host George Janko has an absolutely insane month, that must be pretty painful.
George Janko had Andrew Tate on this show, on the podcast, before Logan Paul and Mike Malak from the Impaulsive podcast had him on there. What are your thoughts?
He did the Tate and he did Patrick Bet David. He had a great week.
Why don't we get these guests? Because we don't try.
No, because you're a liberal.
Oh yeah, you're right.
They're both red pill.
So I need to go more down that lane. Like
both of them, literally both of them have invited me on their shows, and I would go on both their shows. Obviously, you guys are recently, as of the past week, in a dialogue and a conversation with one of the bigger commentators in that space, Andrew Tate. And I want to talk to you guys about this because I know you talked about it on your show for a few minutes.
We gave him an offer.
Yeah,
there's one thing to do. You can
10 mil for Andrew, 10 mil for Tristan, 10 mil for you, 10 mil for me, and
but here's what they'll say: I don't need this for the money. You're gonna have to slap $50 million for me even to get out of bed. But
Yeah,
but if
bro,
you have
okay.
money,
All right.
have money, then why is it about the money?
And I do believe that Logan Paul has already seen George Janko's podcast with Andrew Tate because, I mean, it was massive. And also on a recent episode, Logan Paul and Jake Paul tried to call out Andrew Tate and his brother to a MMA match, I believe, it's pretty silly. It is just an attempt to get some clout. And also, since Logan Paul ruined his chances of ever being on the Joe Rogan Experience, I think it would be hilarious if somehow George Janko gets there first. I mean, I don't think it'll ever happen, but at this point, who knows? And once again, in terms of monthly numbers, the podcast is still massive, which is insane because, I mean, it's clear that they don't really care that much and they've been putting less and less effort every episode. I mean, it's getting so bad that recently they had a kid on the podcast and the whole episode flopped. It only got like 140,000 views. I mean, obviously flops, I'm talking about flopping in terms of Impaulsive numbers, obviously, but it does make sense because just by looking at the thumbnail and the title, who would want to watch that episode? But it's insane because even with the low effort that they're putting in the podcast, they're still getting the same amount of views as some of the biggest comedy podcasts out there. So now that the ex-co-host that he was making fun of has a massively successful podcast, the brother that he was making fun of is now a better boxer. I wonder what the relationship with Mike Malak will be going forward.
Nice. So wait, you're sad we aren't friends anymore?
Yeah, I mean, I called manager Jeff about it the other day. I'm gonna be up front, bro. You don't talk. We don't talk anymore. We don't talk anymore. It's like you. And honestly,
you call him pal.
Oh, you're gonna really start diving in. This was a big topic on the last Jeff FM. I could read some of your recent texts and be like, yo, bro, what's the plan tonight? Blah, 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 so on and so forth. Can't wait to see you. Not sure, boss. No idea, pal.
You're the boss.
Let you know soon, chief. Like, bro, you pet turn me so bad, bro. Like, you're one step away from how bad do you want to call me buddy right now? Be honest, how bad do you want to call me buddy?
I would never, bud. You're my buddy. You're my pal. You're my fucking pal. But we should
make time because, bro, this before the greatest boxer of all time comes on, this show was built around friendship. the vibe on this show, the demeanor of this show was built around our shared stories together and the friendship that we had.
By the way, look at Caleb. What dog did y'all feed these two before you gave them to me? They're absolutely destroyed, mauled pair of headphones.
Well, we can't even afford a new pair now with the current viewership.
Yeah, we did get reamed. Yeah, but bro, we had a 13-year-old. Like, come on, we're putting her on. She's 13.
You have to admit, bro, this podcast is now, bro.
Yeah, it is.
We don't hang out as much anymore. That's part of it. I'm going to just come straight out. I'm going to come out of the closet right now on this podcast.
Now, obviously, besides their whole friendship falling apart, I think the podcast quality has dropped really, really bad, and the guests are a hit or miss. And another great way to tell how his reputation has changed in just 1 year is simply by looking at both of his appearances on the Flagrant podcast. For example, the first time that he was on, it turned out to be one of Flagrant's most viewed episode ever, and for the most part, the feedback was positive. But the second time that he was on, it was chaos. It is now Flagrant's most disliked episode, and the feedback was overall negative. Now, when it comes to Logan Paul, at least he was able to leverage his show to build a massive company that will probably allow him to never worry about money ever again. So even if he does let the podcast go, it wouldn't really matter or make a difference in his life, but it would show that he was what he was all about, which was money. Now, to be fair, everybody knows that by this point that he only cares about making more money, but it's still so wild that he would stop caring about the podcast, because you can still make it work, make it, do it once a month or figure something out. But the fact that he just stopped caring about it, which makes me think that there is a possibility that he's making so much money with Prime, with his beverage company, that even the income potential of a massive podcast like the Impaulsive podcast seems like not that much to him, or seems like it's not worth it, which is absolutely insane to think about.
And this is the first episode I've ever felt like I was the outsider on. Like
right. This is our show now. I know actually. That. Welcome to Impaulsive.
Impaulsive.
That was awesome.
Nina Eggdog Paul coming in hot on Impaulsive. I actually thought about replacing you with her eventually.
I think the audience would love that. Dude. Having a strong, independent female energy on the show.
I can't wait for all the Johnny comments. So
we'll get into that. But no, seriously, get the fuck up.
Are we going to switch?
Yeah.
Oh, that's very nice. Okay.
Is this okay for you?
Now, I don't think the podcast will be ending anytime soon. I mean, it's still a massive platform and a great way for them to advertise all their stuff. So I don't think it'll be ending anytime soon. However, I do wonder if the podcast will remain the same or if they will make some changes to it, because although I don't think Mike is a bad co-host, he's all right, and some of his vlogs are pretty entertaining, I don't see a scenario where Logan Paul keeps him around for much longer. I mean, not in a bad way, but it's clear that Logan Paul is moving towards a more athletic lifestyle and, selling to a younger audience, with the whole Prime and the wrestling. So Mike doesn't really fall into any of those categories anymore. I mean, if he goes into the comedy podcast world, he's probably the youngest one out there. And there was some speculation that Logan Paul wanted to replace everyone with his girlfriend on the podcast, and that would be a complete disaster. I mean, last time that she was on, the episode was crushed with dislikes and the comments had to be disabled. But it will be interesting to see what happens to the podcast in the next upcoming months and see if it comes back or if it ends up failing. At the end of the day, I think it's all Logan Paul's fault. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Leave a like and subscribe to support the channel. Dislike if you didn't like the video. But that is all we have for today. See ya.